everybody, and welcome to the latest edition of the Sideline Guys right here at sidelineguys.recordernews.com. I'm Mark Robarge along with Adam Schinder. And this week, we're going to start off talking about the Amsterdam Mohawks. And yes, I know it's a summertime sport, and it's anything but summertime out there right now. But the Mohawks had their annual Hall of Fame dinner on Saturday night. Adam was there to cover it, and a good time was had by all. Ron Darling, the former Mets pitcher, current Met broadcaster, was the keynote speaker. Maybe the biggest news to come out, though, was a little bit of a preview of this year's Mohawks team.
Yeah, the Mohawks really unfurled their whole slate for the 2011 season in the new Perfect Game Collegiate Baseball League. They opened June 9th at home, Shuttleworth Park. It's a Thursday night against the Albany Dutchmen. But they also unveiled at least their first pass at the 2011 roster. And the name that jumped out the most to anyone who's around here is Josh Nethaway, the former Fonda Fultonville three-sport star. He's now a redshirt freshman catcher at UAlbany. I saw him play his senior year at Fonda in all three sports. A really terrific hitter. He's got prototypical size. He's 6'1", 210, 215. Did not hit for as much power at the high school level as you think, but he's a tremendous live drive hitter. A couple of years ago in a game up at Fort Plain where it's very hard to hit the ball out, he hit one off of Fort Plain's Dan Wiezek that I think that it's a line drive bullet off a hanging curveball that is still rising.
It's nice to have a local kid on the roster as an additional draw. It's not like the Mohawks have a problem drawing crowds to Shuttleworth Park. They're by far the best, well, not by far, but they were the best draw in the old NYCBL, and of course they'll probably be one of the better draws this year in the Perfect Game Collegiate Baseball League.
It's going to take a while to get used to saying that.
I know, and boy, that's a tongue twister too. But I guess the question I had, and we talked a little bit about this in the newsroom over the weekend, is when I first talked to the organizers of the new league, they said that there would be an immediate impact in the quality of player that would be brought aboard just by having the perfect game connection. So the question I asked you, and I'll ask you it again, do we see that in this initial roster? Do we see a step up in level in talent?
You see, when you see that step up, I don't think you're going to see it as much with the Mohawks as you will with other teams in the league, because the Mohawks were, by the time they left the NYCBL, so far ahead in terms of their talent scouting. But if you do look at this roster, they've got 3 or 4 guys who have already been drafted on this team. Most of the roster is major conference players. Most of them, there's probably of the 26 guys I saw, there's probably about 13, about half of them were the SEC. It's all Mississippi State, Auburn, Alabama. They've got a long connection at Kentucky. They've got some Cincinnati players, Wake Forest. They've got a kid out of Hawaii. And then you've got a couple kids, either from smaller conference schools, 1 or 2 junior college kids. But it's a team where I think you'll see the bump up in talent is perhaps in the rest of the league. The Mohawks, I think they're just keeping up. We'll have to wait until June to see just what the talent level is. But I think this is at the very least on par with what they've done the last 2 years.
And 2 other noteworthy names on the initial roster as well. One of the local kid, Chris Barone, Gloversville product, who pitched last year
Mohawk Valley
Community College, also pitched for the Diamond Dogs last year as well.
Yes.
The Mohawk Valley Diamond Dogs in the NYCBL. And the one returning player from last year, and this is actually a good player to have as a returning player, the team's closer from last year, Abram Williams, will be back, I assume, closing for the Mohawks again. And that's a great place to start your team, having that back end of the bullpen cemented already.
Yeah, and with Keith Griffin coming back as well, he knows Abram. He knows what he's going to get out of him. Basically, wasn't touched all of last year, especially in save situations. Closer out of Radford has a tremendous curveball. And that's really what they've done with this team. They always bring 1 or 2 guys back from the previous year, and you just build on that core, and they're going to look for another championship in 2011. And in an 8-team league, there's no reason seeing that they can't easily contend for one again.
All right, let's shift gears, talking about contending, get to our top 5 high school basketball rankings. And hard to believe we've only got about 2.5, 3 weeks left in the regular season, hard to believe as it is. And teams should be starting to round into the form that they're going to need if they're going to be sectional contenders. And I'll start out with my top 5, and I'll tell you what, looking at my top 5, unfortunately, it's got more teams that seem to be either just treading water or actually on the decline right now, which is not a good sign. My number 5 is Broad Alban Perth. Slide 6 games in a row they've lost now after losing last week, 3 games last week. Hudson Falls, Scotia Glenville, Glens Falls. No breathing room this week either. They've got Tuesday night at Fonda, Friday at home against South Glens Falls, and then next Monday at Gloversville. Number 4, I'm dropping Amsterdam down there. It's a close decision, but I'm going to put them down there after a frustrating week as well. They had the overtime loss at home against LaSalle, and then a loss against Schenectady where they basically just kind of faded at the end. They played with Schenectady, the Patriots, all the way through until probably about early fourth quarter, and then collapsed. Mayfield, my number 3 team, and this team is starting to come on, and I didn't realize this until I had a chance to talk to Fort Plain coach Craig Phillips last week, but since they got 6'2" guard Colt Duppin back, Mayfield's been on this 4-game winning streak, and Phillips is quite concerned about this team moving on into the season. Number 2, Fonda Fultonville, probably the shot of the year and the upset of the year last week in their win over Lansingburg on the last-second bank shot by Luke Nethaway. And number 1, no surprise, Fort Plain once again. The Hilltoppers just keep rolling right along. They knocked off backyard rival Canajoharie Friday night. 10-day break now until the rematch with Spa Catholic at Fort Plain. Just nothing more you can say about this team. Still head and shoulders above everybody else.
My top 5 pretty similar. A couple flip-flops. Number 5, I have BP. This is a team that is far too talented to be in that number 5 spot. They have slides like this most years in this league. 2 years ago when they won the sectionals, they were just 13-7 coming out of the regular season. They need to round into form. I think they've got enough talent. This is a team that, in that Class Double B, when they get there, they're going to have a chance to make a run if their big guys can produce on offense. When they have to rely on Tyler Wood and RJ Pingator, then they just become too one-dimensional. Number 4 is Mayfield, simply because they haven't beaten anyone at the top of that WAC North yet. They had their best win. They beat Mechanicville. They had a very good win against Schoharie, but until they beat either Spa Catholic or Fort Plain, and they'll have their chance against both of them in the coming week, they got to stay down at number 4. Number 3, I've got Amsterdam moving up a little bit. As much as they tailed off at the end of Friday night's game against Schenectady, it was probably their best performance against a quality team all season long. They finally started to develop a little bit of a rhythm in a half court. Antonio Johnson knocked down 7 3-pointers, scored 30 points. Number 2, Fonda Fultonville. They'd have a little firmer grip on number 2 had they beaten Mechanicville on Saturday. The win over Lansingburg at home is terrific. Lansingburg's a team that's going to contend for the Class A title. And number 1, no surprise, Fort Plain. They're 12-1. They're among the best records of any team in the entire section. They've got their 2 big games left down the stretch. They've got a rematch with Spa Catholic. They've got a rematch with Mayfield. Luckily, that rematch against Spa Catholic will be at Fort Plain. Right. So it's going to be a very, very interesting stretch run, especially in that WAC North.
And going back to something I was talking about before with Craig Phillips talking about Mayfield and how he's concerned about it, brought up something that we wanted to wrap up this week talking about a little bit. It's something that I've learned over the years to call coach speak. I've interviewed, I can't say hundreds of coaches literally in the 30 years that I've been covering sports in one form or another. And coach speak is something that is very interesting because you come to realize that coaches aren't going to necessarily give you an honest assessment of their teams. They're going to do more to serve their purpose of educating their players, if you will. And Friday night's game between Canajoharie and Fort Plain that I covered was a prime example of that. Fort Plain rolled to a 15-point win over Canajoharie. Really was never challenged. Had a big run in the second quarter to win it. But after the game, you would have thought that Canajoharie had won and Fort Plain had lost. Rick Palumbo, the Canajoharie coach, really pumping up his kids, talking about their heart and not giving up and like that. Craig Phillips, meanwhile, the Fort Plain coach, picking out the chinks in the team's armor and like that. And it was interesting to sit back and listen to both of them talk because it's exactly what you expect from good high school coaches. They're not going to tell you necessarily, give you an honest assessment of their team's performance. They're going to do what they can to motivate their players, if they will. In Palumbo's case, to boost the confidence of his players who have had a really tough season at 3-8. Or in Phillips's case, to kind of pick at his players to not get complacent as he fears they've become as well.
And the other thing I always notice when I talk to coaches is that coaches have their own favorite words. You will never see anyone other than a coach use the word out-physical. You will not find that in Webster's dictionary. The same things. We've got to prepare better. There are token phrases that every single coach has. You'll find them in almost every single interview you do with a certain coach. Certain guys have certain techniques. Craig Phillips is very much like a Lou Holtz.
Yeah.
His team could be the greatest team in the world, and you talk to him, you'd think they couldn't beat the Mudville 9.
Right, but
without
the same
Mike
token,
Casey.
when his teams are struggling, he will be the first one to do exactly what Rick Palumbo did with his Kansas City team, and that's pump them up, to make them believe in themselves, to give them confidence, because in so many cases, especially with high school athletes, it's as much about confidence as anything else.
Yeah, coaches are certainly an interesting breed. They're not born. Coaches are made over a long time. Be interesting to see what we hear from these coaches during the rest of the season. We're the Sideline Guys. For Mark, I'm Adam. We'll see you next week right here, sidelineguys.recordernews.com.